Continuing my read-through of the Bible, I now come to the first book of Maccabees. Now, this is another book that I have not read before because I grew up Protestant, and this book was not in the Protestant Bible. It's in the Catholic Bible. I'm reading a Catholic Bible now, which is why I'm reading it. It's in the Eastern Orthodox Bible. It's in the Ethiopian Bible, but it's not in the Protestant Bible. So it's my first time through this book, and as such, the commentary here is going to be a little bit surface level. Apologies in advance, but there is a lot in here, and this is my first time through it. I'm still having trouble absorbing everything, but I'll try and talk through this as best I can. So the book of Maccabees I was vaguely familiar. I have been vaguely familiar with since 7th grade. And by vaguely familiar, I mean I knew it existed. So in my 7th grade Bible class, this was the first time I remember that we talked about the intertestament period, the period between the Old Testament, the end of the Old Testament and the Protestant Bibles, and the beginning of the New Testament, where there's a 400-year gap. When the Protestant Bible ends, it's just after the Jews have returned from the exile under the Persian Empire. So the Old Testament ends there. The New Testament picks up 400 years later when the Romans are ruling the entire Mediterranean. And there's a gap of 400 years in between, which Protestants just kind of skip over. But the book of Maccabees covers some of that gap. Not all of it, but some of it. So what happened in the meantime, in between the Persians and the Romans, is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great came in and conquered all of the known world, including Israel. And that in the book of Maccabees is just covered here in just one paragraph. This book is primarily concerned with what happened after Alexander the Great died. Well, if you know your history, Alexander the Great died, and then his empire was divided up among his generals and devolved into 4 different kingdoms. And then Israel was ruled by the Seleucid Empire. Now, the Seleucid Empire is one of those areas of history that I think us casual history buffs don't know a lot about. Right? So when you're getting into ancient history, you always talk about classical Greece and classical Athens and Sparta. You talk about Alexander the Great, but the period of the Eastern Greek empires, the Oriental Greek empires, like the Seleucid Empire, which had taken over what used to be the Persian Empire but was under Greek control, I think that gets skipped over in a lot of histories, unless you're really into it. It's the kind of thing that I wish I knew more about because it sounds fascinating to me, a Greek ruler in a Persian empire, in Persian lands. It's long been on my list to read up one of these days, but never got around to it. Anyways, I'm rambling, aren't I, and going on a digression. Point being, I guess, if you're interested in this area of history, this is a fascinating little book for you. And this book will appeal to people who are interested in history and interested in biblical history and interested in the intersection of the two. And people who are not interested in those things will not find this book so appealing. But anyways, back to the main story. Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the ruler of the Seleucid kingdom, tries to outlaw Judaism. So he persecutes the Jews, he desecrates the temple, he allegedly sacrifices a pig in the Jewish temple. And all of this arouses Mattathias to unleash a holy war against the Greeks. And then Mattathias leads that holy war until he dies, here in the death of Mattathias. And then his holy war is taken over by his sons. He has 5 sons, I believe. So the first son who takes over is Judas Maccabees. Judas Maccabeus, from which the book of Maccabees gets its name. Now, you may have heard in Sunday school or wherever that Maccabeus means the hammer. But I was watching a YouTube video on this shortly before filming, and apparently that's just a conjecture. Apparently nobody knows what Maccabeus means, but could mean the hammer. Anyways, it says, then his son Judas called Maccabeus. So Maccabeus is not actually his last name, even though it says Judas Maccabeus. It's Judas, the son of Mattathias, who was called Maccabeus. Now, the book of Maccabees gets its name from Judas Maccabeus. It struck me when I was reading this that this seems to be a little bit of a misnomer, because Judas Maccabeus is only one of several sons of Mattathias who lead the rebellion. So Judas Maccabeus leads it for several chapters, but then he eventually dies. Here we go, in chapter 9, the death of Judas Maccabeus. And then the torch passes to another one of his brothers, Jonathan. And so then Jonathan leads the resistance. And Jonathan is in charge for several chapters. And then Jonathan dies. Where is it? Yeah. Coming up here. So Jonathan dies. He gets captured and dies. And then Simon takes command. And then Simon, this is the last brother. There's one more brother, John, but he gets killed in an ambush. So he's not alive at this point. Simon takes over until Simon's tragic death at Dock. And it's somewhat of an anticlimactic ending, or, all of a sudden Simon just gets assassinated, and then his son succeeds him, and then the book is over. Now, there is Second Maccabees, which I haven't read yet, so I'll try and delay commenting on that until I've actually read it. But Second Maccabees is not actually a continuation of First Maccabees. And this is maybe different than some of the other first and second books in the Bible, right? Like 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Those are all essentially one book, which was split into 2 scrolls for, reasons of convenience at one point. 1st and 2nd Maccabees are 2 completely different works that are next to each other in the Bible and are both called Maccabees, but they're not continuations of each other. So when First Maccabees ends here, that's where the story ends. Okay, so there is a lot to talk about in here. Like I said, if you're interested in history, then this is a fascinating book for you. And for me. As usual, I've got a 30-minute limit on these videos. That's when that's the file size limit on my camera. So that's my time limit. I typically, particularly when I'm talking about the books of the Bible, I typically just ramble on until my time is up. I imagine I'm going to do that today. You never know because these are unscripted, but I feel like I've got a lot of things I want to comment on in this book. And we will see how far I get. Right, so I guess let's talk about why this isn't in the Protestant Bible, first of all. The reason it's not in the Protestant Bible is the reason that the rest of the Catholic Apocrypha is not in the Protestant Bible. These books come from the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. The Christian church appropriated the Septuagint as their Old Testament because they were Greek-speaking in the early history of the church. But during the Protestant Reformation, there was a move to go back to the Hebrew canon, and the Hebrews did not recognize these books as canonical, partly because they were in Greek. According to Wikipedia, it's an open question whether or not the first book of Maccabees was originally written in Hebrew or in Greek. But if it was originally written in Hebrew, we don't have it. We just have the Greek copy of it. Now, for a book that's very pro-Israel and Israelite nationalism. I almost said Israeli, but Israeli is from the 20th century. The term for the ancient world is Israelite. Anyways, for a book which is very pro-Jewish nationalism, it seems to me surprising that this is not in the Jewish canon. But according to Wikipedia, the Jews later had their problems with the Maccabee family, or I guess what is known as the Hasmonean dynasty. Maccabee, again, only refers to Judas Maccabeus, even though the entire book is named after him. But anyways, the Hasmonean dynasty, which is the name of this family, it proved to be unpopular later in Rabbinic Judaism. Wikipedia says for a variety of reasons, and just leaves it at that. I don't actually know what those reasons are. I feel like at one point I have read something at that. Some of the introduction to the Old Testament by Lawrence Boat, I think, talked on some of the factionalism of this period. Unfortunately, I don't remember that perfectly, and I no longer have my copy with me. But you can somewhat see hints of it even within First Maccabees. The Jews are fighting foreign oppressors, the Greeks, but there are also hints that there's also a civil war going on here. So there's different groups of Jewish people who are opposed to the Judas Maccabees and his family. They come at the edges of the book. Like the author of this book will complain about the Jews who opposed Judas Maccabeus and his family. But they are definitely in here. And then I believe near the end of the Hasmonean dynasty, there was a lot of infighting and civil wars and treachery and grasping for the throne, and the same thing that's in any dynasty. And I believe that's eventually how the Romans got into Judea, is because they were invited in during one of the civil wars in the Hasmonean dynasty. But anyways, that's why it's not part of the Jewish canon or the Protestant canon. I was looking on Google and on Wikipedia to see if I could find an additional reason why this wasn't in the Protestant Bibles, because my understanding is, although the Apocrypha was rejected as a group by the Protestants because it was not in the Hebrew canon, that there are also individual reasons why the Protestants objected to each individual book. I couldn't find that in here, although I couldn't find that directly stated anywhere on Wikipedia or on Google or on my internet searches. But I found a couple indirect hints. So the book of Maccabeus seems to despise martyrs. And I guess what we mean by martyrs here is people who just die for the cause without fighting. So there's an interesting thing very early on in chapter 2, the ordeal of the Sabbath in the desert, in which there's a group of Jews who are resisting the Greeks. The Greek army comes out against them, but they refuse to fight. So they say, "We refuse to come out, and we are not going to obey the king's orders and so profane the Sabbath day." And they said, "Let us all die innocent. Let heaven and earth bear witness that you are massacring us with no pretense of justice." And then they got massacred because they refused to fight on the Sabbath. So after this happens, Mattathias and his associates decide that this is not a very effective way to fight the war. So they said, if anyone attacks us on the Sabbath day, whoever he may be, we will resist him. We must not all be killed, as our brothers were in the hiding places. So this, now I know the Christian attitude towards violence is complicated and has changed through the centuries, but I guess one of the objections of the church to this book is the early Christian martyrs who who practiced passive disobedience and martyrdom in the Roman Empire seem to, this doesn't seem to validate that experience or that philosophy. So maybe that's one reason why it was rejected. Now, another interesting thing about this book is this book contains the origins of Hanukkah. And again, ironic that this is not part of the Jewish canon, but during the purification of the temple and its dedication, there's a 8-day celebration. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. The dedication of the altar should be celebrated yearly at the proper season for 8 days, beginning on the 25th of the month Shivlev, with rejoicing and gladness. So it never says Hanukkah here, but apparently that is what this is referring to, the origins of Hanukkah. So I'm actually recording this video in mid-December, so I guess this is a little coincidental timing. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy Hanukkah. But I'm told, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I'm told that Hanukkah isn't actually one of the major Jewish holidays, that it's like a minor Jewish holiday. But it got made into a big deal just so that people could feel like they were including Jews during the holiday season. So, so that people had something to say to Jewish people during the Christmas season. They could say, "Oh, okay, we're doing Christmas, you're doing Hanukkah, we both have holidays." Somebody correct me if I'm getting that wrong. The other thing is, I guess Hanukkah has something to do with the miracle of the lamp and the oil that never went out for 8 days or something like that, which is not anywhere in here. So that's... Yeah, so arguably this book doesn't have the origin of Hanukkah in here. It does, I guess, but not with the miracle. So yeah, the most interesting part about Hanukkah, the miracle part, is not in here, but the other part about Hanukkah is. Okay, let me back up and maybe make some more general comments about this. The overall outline of the book is relatively simple, and I went through the overall outline before. So there's Antiochus Epiphanes persecutes the Jews. Mattathias unleashes the holy war. Mattathias dies, and then his sons pick up the mantle one by one. First Judas, then Jonathan, and then Simon. So that's simple enough. What makes this book really complicated is all the other history happening around it. So there are several other wars going on during this time in which the Jews are caught in the middle. There's the Ptolemy line, that's the Greek kingdom of Egypt, is fighting with the Seleucids from time to time. There's also what appears to be kind of a breakaway part of the Seleucid Empire on the coast, which a few times tries to conquer the Seleucid Empire. And then there's some usurping and fighting for the throne as well in the Seleucid Empire. So when you add in all the peripheral stuff, all the other kingdoms that are jockeying around and fighting, then it becomes quite a complicated story. And I've read through this once, but I'm not sure I can remember all the details of the story confidently enough to try and recount it. So, if you want to find out more, pick this book up yourself, I guess. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. I would recommend it if you're interested in history. I guess speaking of history, I might as well talk about history. I think the general consensus is that this book is generally historically accurate, although a very biased recounting of the history. The editors of the Jerusalem Bible seem to think as well. Where did they say it? Yeah, here we go. This is from the introduction, but from the Jerusalem Bible. As a history of the time, it is invaluable, but allowances must be made for the author's intention of writing a religious history modeled on the ancient chronicles of Israel. So I guess the author is intentionally trying to model the style of 1st and 2nd Kings. According to Wikipedia, we don't have the surviving Hebrew version of this, if indeed it was originally written in Hebrew. The Greek version intentionally uses archaic Greek, so I guess Greek that would have been archaic even at the time it was translated, so that they are going for like an ancient chronicle type feeling here. Obviously that doesn't come through in the English translation. There are all sorts of little interesting historical details here. Like, let me see if I can find some. Oh yeah, here we go. Demetrius the first becomes king. So this is Maccabees 7. In the year 150, Demetrius, son of Seleucus, escaped from Rome and arrived with a few men at a town on the coast. Now, this is the first time we hear of this guy. So if you're just reading this and you don't know anything, like me, you're like, okay, wait, who is this Demetrius? What was he doing in Rome? How did he escape? So, of course, you Google it and you go to the Wikipedia page. And sure enough, this guy was a real historical person and he was being held as a hostage in Rome. And he did escape from Rome. He has to be let go several times to retake control of the Seleucid Empire. The Romans refused because the Romans wanted a weak Seleucid Empire and they didn't want him to take control and centralize things. But he eventually escaped. If I'm remembering right, it was with the aid of the famous historian Polybius, who helped him do it and then wrote about it. So, I regret that I don't know more about this period of history, but if I ever had the time, I would love to read more about it. You put it on my list of things to read up on someday. I mean, that's a long list, but maybe I'll get around to it someday. And there are, documents about the treaty with the Romans and the Spartans, eulogy of the Romans, the alliance between the Jews and the Romans. Now, this, of course, is about, 200 years, 100 years or so before the Roman Empire will conquer Judea. So it's the guy who wrote First Maccabees, whoever he was, I guess presumably doesn't know that some point in the future the Romans will actually come in and conquer Judea. Because the Romans get a very nice write-up here. At a couple different points in First Maccabees. Now Judas had heard of the reputation of the Romans, their military strength, and their benevolence towards all who made common cause with them. There's a few different spots here. There's, where is it? The renewal of the alliances with Sparta and Rome near the end, for example. So both Sparta and Rome get very nice write-ups in Maccabees, which, of course, is very different than the write-ups that the Romans get in the New Testament, where they are presented as the oppressors, at least in some of the books of the New Testament. So, yeah, again, maybe another reason, possibly why the Protestants rejected this book. Oh, yes, and there's also some really cool battle scenes in here. Like, where is it? Oh, yeah, here we go. This is in 1 Maccabees 6. It talks about them fighting the elephant formation. So the elephants were shown a syrup of grapes and mulberries to prepare them for the battle. They distributed these animals among the phalanxes, allocating to each elephant 1,000 men dressed in coats of mail with bronze helmets on their heads. On each elephant, to protect it, was a stout wooden tower kept in position by girths, each with its team fighting from their mountain position as well as its driver. The remainder of the cavalry was stationed on one or other of the two flanks of the army to harass the enemy and cover the phalanxes. So what happens to the elephants? Well, here we get the exciting part next. When the sun glinted on the bronze and the golden shields, the mountains caught the glint and gleamed like fiery torches. One part of the king's army was deployed high up in the mountains and the other in the valley floor, all advancing confidently and in good order. Everyone trembled at the noise made by this vast multitude and the number of the troops on the march and the clanking of their armor, for it was an immense and mighty army. Judas and his army advanced to give battle, and 600 of the king's army were killed. Eleazar, called Avaran, noticed that one of the elephants was royally caparisoned, I don't know what that means, and also taller than all the others, and supposing that the king was mounted on it, sacrificed himself to save his people and win an imperishable name, boldly charging towards the creature through the thick of the phalanx, dealing death to right and left, so the enemy scattered on either side of his onslaught. He darted in under the elephant, ran his sword into it, and killed it. The beast collapsed on top of him, and he died on the spot. Yeah, that's the most dramatic battle scene. But there are a few interesting ones in here in the book of 1 Maccabees. So, when I'm reading this book, I'm kind of viewing it through a couple different lenses. One lens is remembering when I was a young boy in Sunday school or in Bible story time in my Christian school, and how fascinated I was by these stories of Old Testament battles. And I'm imagining to myself an alternate universe in which the Protestants did not take these books out of the Bible, and which, First Maccabees was still part of Sunday school. And, if you grew up in the church, you can imagine this as well as I can, the illustrated children's Bibles that have pictures of all the famous stories from the Old Testament. And maybe there's a picture of a guy fighting the elephant in the middle of the battle. And how cool would that have been for any 7-year-old boy, huh? So that's one lens. The other lens is the Christopher Hitchens lens, which I had in, I guess, my 20s and 30s, in which I looked at all the violent stories in the Bible, and I thought, as Christopher Hitchens did, isn't it ridiculous that we were supposed to get our morality from such a violent book? Certainly, if the books of Maccabees had been included in the Protestant Bible, I would have had a lot more to complain about, because these are very violent books, and they also seem to approve of massacres of towns that are adversaries of Judas Maccabees and his family. So it's definitely problematic in that way. I'm out of time. There's more to talk about, but my time is up.